Good morning and welcome back. We will today now finish our conversations with the Romantic poets, and more particularly the Generation 2 Romantic poets, and in particular the great John Keats. We're going to turn now to Keats's famous Ode on a Grecian Urn, where we will be working now to first of all just understand the background of this poem, and then finally some of the implications. I want to make a couple of general observations right away for your notes. One, Ode on a Grecian Urn is easily the most important poem that people who study the work of John Keats will always talk about in regards to importance. Always considered one of the most important Keats poems. Almost always considered one of the 5 greatest poems in the English language, believe it or not. There's a lot of ink that has been spilled on this poem, and especially the last few lines of this poem. What exactly is Keats saying, etc., etc. Number 2, Keats, as a romantic in the vein of Shelley and Byron, loves all things Grecian. That is to say, of or related to the Greek culture. There's a couple of reasons for this. One of them has to do with a chap named Elgin, E-L-I-G-I-N, Elgin. Elgin was a treasure finder who journeyed from England to any number of parts of the world, but he ended up in Athens, where, are you ready for this? No. He just outright, under cover of night, stole large pieces of Greek art, put it on a boat, and brought it back to England, where it was displayed. These were referred to as the Elgin marbles, and these Elgin friezes and marbles and all kinds of findings from Greece had a tremendous influence on people like John Keats, who would go and look at them. Okay, and he in fact wrote a famous sonnet on the Elgin marbles. My spirit is too weak, mortality weighs upon me like unwilling sleep. Listen to these lines. And each imagined pinnacle is steep of godlike hardship tells me I must die like a sick eagle looking at the sky. It's a profound word picture. When he's looking at these old Grecian relics, he says, because he's coughing up blood at this point, that he realizes the way he's going to die is like a sick eagle stuck up in the crags of a high rock, watching the other eagles soar in the beautiful sky while he himself is soon to die. The mixing then of love of the Greek antiquities with the realization that he himself will soon die is a profound moment in Keats's life. Finally, Keats is very enamored of one work of art that he sees in these findings called an urn. Now, do you understand what that word means? Because this poem is kind of a little bit lost on students if you don't know what an urn is. What is an urn? Does anyone know what this is? So if people live and die and then they are cremated, their ashes are put inside of, well, you're kind of looking at one on 890, aren't you? Right? These ashes are put inside. Now, I should point out, this is not the urn that's being referenced in this poem. We should now go directly to level 1 of our annotation. Like before, right away, you're noticing that there are numbered headings. Do you see them? 5 of them, starting on 891, going to 892. So you definitely, on your annotations, want to write Roman numerals 1 through 5, skipping a few lines, all right? And then we're simply going to point out that this is an ode. That is to say, a poem spoken directly to an inanimate object. In this case, it's an urn. Now, for your notes at level 1, you might want to point out that in the first part of this poem, all really Keats is going to do is to describe what he sees on the outside of the urn. See, the urn had a utilitarian value. You put ashes inside. But on the outside, an artist would do all kinds of artwork to make the urn look beautiful, okay? In the same way that you're looking at one on page 890. But the urn that Keats is looking at will have different kinds of drawings on the outside. For example, there's going to be a guy and a girl sitting under a tree. He's almost kissing her. There's going to be a guy chasing a girl. She's running from him. There's going to be a little town up on a kind of like a rocky cliff. And then outside of the town, some people are following a large cow that they're about to engage in sacrifice. What time of the year did the Greeks engage in this kind of sacrifices? In the spring, right? Those orphic kinds of sacrifices in the spring. So that's all happening. Finally, the urn was set in such a way that it had a pedestal that turned so that Keats could sit, and we're told that he sat for long hours, day after day, where all he did was just look at this work of art as it turned. So you don't have to move. You can sit in one spot, and you can see all of the different sides of the urn. For those of you that have ever been to an art museum, it's possible maybe you've seen oftentimes these kinds of spherical types of objects are displayed this way, where you can look at it as it turns. He then comes to this poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn. And as I say, literally thousands and thousands of pages have been written about the last few lines of this poem. Not so much the first few lines of the poem, but the last few lines of the poem. Let's now read the poem, and then we'll just exegete together, shall we? So you should be with me now on page 891, Ode on a Grecian Urn. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme? What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape of deities or mortals or of both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens loathe? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and trembles? What wild ecstasy? Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye soft pipes, play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Fair youth beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve, she cannot fade. Though thou hast not thy bliss, forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. Ah, happy, happy boughs, that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu, and happy melodists, unwearied, forever piping songs, forever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting, and forever young. All breathing human passion far above that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead, and a parching tongue. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer, lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of this folk this pious morn? And, little town, thy streets forever will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can ne'er return. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity, cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all you know on earth, and all you need to know. Now, the poem is actually a fairly simple poem. Let's just say this out loud. This is not a real complicated poem until it gets complicated. Let's just say it out loud, right? In other words, the poem in its essence is a pretty simple poem. Let's just work at level 1 real quickly. It shan't take us long. Keats is looking at an urn that has artwork on the outside of it, right? Now, let's get a couple of things out of the way. This artwork comes from where? Right. From made by who? Now this is a little more complicated question. By who? Right. We can answer in the abstract, well, I don't know, some Greek guy made it. Some Greek guy? Well, okay, probably an artist. Right. Which artist? Well, we don't know. Now this all of a sudden becomes interesting. This artist, is he still living so Keats can go visit him? Can't, huh? Can't. In other words, let's just point something out right away. The artwork lasts much longer than the artist, who is clearly now dead and gone. Why would Keats be at all interested in a project like that, recognizing that the art can outlast the artist? Why might he be interested in that? You got it. It's very similar to his own hope, that even though he knows he soon must die, he at least hoped that somebody would read his lines after he was dead. He believed not very much. Here lies one whose name was written in water, remember? He has put on his tombstone. But nonetheless, he's kind of interested in this project of some cat makes this urn, it gets buried under the ground or whatever, it's found by Elgin or somebody else, it's brought back to England, it's sat in a museum, and now Keats can take a look at it and then can talk about it. Well, let's talk about it real quickly. Notice, in part 1, that is to say, notice each one of these parts, notice the Odeon correct form, right? You'll notice we got rhyme scheme, notice we got 10 lines, all that kind of stuff, right? Notice in the first part, he calls the work of art still unravished bride of quietness and foster child of silence and slow time. Put it in your own words. What's he say about this work of art? Why is it a bride of quietness? Works of art can't what? That's going to be ironic. Why is that going to be ironic? Because at the end of the poem, what's going to happen? You got it, you got it. This work of art is actually going to speak. So let's point out right away the irony. He says, works of art never talk until they do. See, notice, we're constantly working with kind of paradoxes here, aren't we? Notice he says about this Sylvan, that's just another word for Greek, historian, right? Who can thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme? And then notice a series of questions that tell you what's on the outside of the urn. Now, you want to write this down because it's going to end up on the exam. Questions about what's on the outside of the urn is going to end up on the exam. But it's pretty simple. Let's just go through them real quickly. You can put it in your own words. Notice he says, what leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape of deities or mortals? Deities here means what? Gods. Yeah, so you got gods and mortals on the thing, or both. In Tempe or Dales of Arcady. And this is just different towns of Greece, right? What men or gods are these? What maidens loathe? What's a maiden? Right, a girl, right? What mad pursuit? Oh, what's that all about? Mad pursuit, right? Got some chasing going on. What struggle to escape? What pipes and trembles? What wild ecstasy? So you got stuff about musical instruments. You got stuff about gods and men. You got stuff about women and being chased and all of that. Part 2. I told you, this doesn't take long. Part 2. He says something interesting about music. And I've had a number of people who love music who say, wow, this is fascinating. He says, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Now, literally, why does he say this? Somebody on the outside of the urn is drawn to be playing music, right? And Keats, the poet, would like to imagine what kind of music would be coming out of that pipe, right? Soft pipes play on. Notice, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Now, because I'm working with time here, I'm going to go rather quickly. How to understand this poem. Watch my whiteboard. See, this is the beautiful thing about having a model that you already know about. Watch this. You'll maybe remember that we talked about Plato's theory of the forms. Do you remember this? Where we have 2 boxes. Do you recall this, right? Above the first box, we wrote what word? If we're talking Plato, we wrote the word what? You're right, images. Above the second box, we write the word forms, concepts, right? Ideas, right? Above the first box, we write the word physical. Above the second box, we write the word metaphysical. Do you remember all this? Then we can talk about a beautiful body, you recall, or we can talk about the concept of beauty, right? You'll remember. We can talk about Ruthie's tree in the first box. We can talk about nature or energy in the second box. Do you remember this? Do you remember in the first box, of or related to the 5 what? Senses. You got it. The 5 senses. Right? Okay? But we didn't ask a question in the earlier presentation of this model that now I want to ask. In which box will you put a work of art? It's its own box. So, for example, the urn that's right there on that page in front of you, or the urn that Keats is looking at. Can you see it? Yeah. Can you touch it? Yeah. Can you taste it? Well, you see, we can do it. Right? See how that works, right? Okay, see. Right? In other words, the work of art has to go where? It does. This work of art, can I just say it this way? Work of art, the work of art, the literal urn, right? In this case, it's the urn. I mean, it has to go in the first box, right? Well, then what are you going to put in the second box as the concept that's related to it? See, now this becomes, problematic. Like, okay, so what if you're going to call this a work of art, maybe lowercase a, right? You would call this uppercase art, right, as a concept. In the same way that you can't touch the number 2, you really can't touch this work of art in the second box, only in the first box. So you got, okay? Maybe a distinction we can make here is in the form of a question. Is there a difference between writing a poem and being a poet? Is there a difference between writing a poem and being a poet? Is there a difference between making a sculpture and being a sculptor? Is there a difference between painting a picture and being a painter? Yeah, for musicians. Is there a difference between playing a piece of music and being a musician? In terms of athletics, is there a difference between playing in a basketball game and being a basketball player? Is there a difference between spiking a volleyball and being a volleyball player? What distinction are we drawing here? Can you put it in your notes? What is the distinction? Is there a difference between wrestling on the mat for one match and being a wrestler? Is there a difference between working on a vehicle and being a mechanic? Is there a difference between doing some cheers and being a cheerleader? See, I could continue with this, but what distinction am I making? Can you write it in your notes? What's the difference that I'm making? What is the difference? One has to do with the degree to which one will constitute one's work as being elevated in some way. Experience has a part to play in it. We normally don't think of a person who can just sit down and play Mary Had a Little Lamb on the piano, a musician, correct? We normally assume that that is going to be a title reserved for people who have some expertise in the area, right? Okay. We could now look back at our poem and we can work rather quickly. Keats is going to begin to work from box 1 to box 2. If you write that down now because you understand this model, this poem can make sense to you. He is looking literally at a work of art, but about that work of art in the first box, he will say, it's far more interesting to think about that work of art in the second box. Heard melodies are sweet. Which box? First box. But those unheard are sweeter. Which box? See how this works? And for the rest of the poem now, this is a pretty easy poem if you understand the concept of the stuff on the whiteboard. Notice he will say, speaking directly to the lovers who are drawn on the urn. One is about to kiss the other. Look at what he says. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. What does that mean? Almost gets there, but not quite. Frozen in time, frozen in art, right? Look what he says, though. Yet do not grieve. Don't be sad. Why not? Well, because she's on this work of art, she cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. In other words, what's he say? There's something kind of cool. Right. There's no aging in the second box. Remember what we say about everything in the first box. It all sags and bags. Remember, it's all going to get old, right? How about the trees? Look what he says in the third part. Think about it. Those trees have leaves because the artist drew the trees in the spring. Can't lose your leaves, right? Ruthie's tree normally loses her leaves every year, right? But can't if it's in a work of art. Your leaves can ever bid the spring adieu. Happy, melodious, unwearied, forever piping songs, forever new. Of course, you've got forever young, right? In other words, let's just say it now. In the second box, about the second box, we would say age less. Works of art do not age the way stuff in the first box ages. Right? Who are these coming to the sacrifice? See, more of the same. Right? Who are these people that are coming out from this little town? Notice it's really, this poem is really nothing more than Keats asking the urn questions. Although really not asking the urn, he's really asking who? This is interesting. Who's he really asking? Think about it. Who's he asking? Really, I mean, who stands behind the urn? Somebody had to make the urn. Right, the artist. He's speaking directly to the artist. Notice you've got one artist speaking to another artist. Of course, only one of the two artists is alive. Guess what? Now both of them are dead. And yet today, this morning, right? We are working with both artists, whether we realize it or not. Of course, the first artist we know much less of than the second artist, that is to say Keats, right? Keats somehow seems to be aware that he's playing this game with us, where he's got one artist commenting to another artist, and then of course you, possibly an artist yourself as reader, looking at this poem. Finally, he ends the poem, and let's get to these famous lines. O Attic shape, that is to say, old, fair attitude, with breed of marblemen and ravens overwrought, forest branches, trodden weed, thou silent, do you see the word? See, if you're paying attention, all of a sudden you realize Keats is playing a game with us. What's the word I wrote down above the... Form. Right, we call this Plato's theory of the forms. That's what we call it, right? Of course, the word form can have different meanings. Notice here, he calls it a silent form. What does it mean, does tease us out of thought? Are you at all familiar with women who sometimes tease their hair? What does that mean? To tease your hair means what? You are drawing it out, right? You're drawing it out. You're kind of making it want to stand up or whatever. McElhaney does this every once in a while, right? Tease your hair, right? This kind of thing. What does it mean to say this work of art teases us out of thought? Can you put that in your own words? What's that mean? What does it mean? What's he say? This work of art does tease us out of thought. Any ideas what that means? He says, when I look at this work of art, thoughts are drawn out of my mind, as doth eternity. What do you mean eternity? Watch my whiteboard. One or two. We can do math in here. Watch this. Okay, so here we go. Math class 101. Are you ready for this? Some of you will go, oh yeah. Takes us back in time. We call that a line segment, right? What does it mean when I do this?
Goes on forever.
Why do I put those little thingies at the end of the line? What does that mean? It means it goes on forever. What do we call that?
A line.
What do we call that also? This going on eternity, right? We call it, whoa, I'm not done. Wait a second. What does it mean when I do this?
Timeline.
What does that mean? What does that mark mean?
Nothing.
It means the center, the middle, we would say, right? Then we can count going negative as well as positive, right? This is supposedly the center, but isn't it the middle of nowhere? How can you have the middle of eternity? Explain that one to me, math whizzes. Hey, dude, I can totally get it if it's a line segment. I can get that, because we can measure that, right? But dude, how do you measure eternity? You already told me that's what these little things mean. Well, how can you tell me you know the middle of that? Right? See, all of a sudden, when you start playing this game, you go, well, I never thought of that before. Tease us out of thought, as does eternity. The minute you start thinking about the concept of eternity, you find yourself going, oh, that is... Well then, dude, I mean, really, if you can't have the middle of nowhere, well then what game are we playing with zero? Yeah. Seeing those Arabics were onto something, huh? When they came up with that concept of zero. Of course, it helps us do all kinds of fun stuff like build buildings and fly airplanes and stuff, right? But where is eternity? Right? Where is eternity? Correct? See, we're back at it again with that little game we played before. Go back to it now. He says, this work of art makes me think the way I think when I think about eternity. Colon, capital C, capital P, cold, pastoral. The word pastoral here means of or related to the world of nature. The word cold here means what, do you imagine? Yeah, well, your footnote here will help you. Write it down. What does the word cold mean? It doesn't change, which puts it in which box? See, it's got to go to the second box if it doesn't change, because sooner or later, even works of art do what? They do. They get old, don't they? And they wear out. Then, speaking of old, he says something interesting. This is words written by a cat who's about to die as a young man. Look at what he says. When old age shall this generation waste, thou wilt remain in midst of other woven hours a friend to man. Put it in your own words. What's he say about this work of art? Pretty soon, everybody he says on the planet that's alive will all be dead. And yet, what about this work of art? Still going to be around. Still going to be around to do what? To be a friend. What kind of friend? A friend that says something. Uh-oh, this is interesting. I thought you said this work of art is quiet. Now all of a sudden Keats changes his mind and says, nope, the work of art seems to say something. Now, watch this. The quotation marks tell us what the work of art says. What is it that the work of art says? Beauty, you want to write this for sure in your notes. I can guarantee you this is going to come up on the exam. Beauty is truth. Truth, beauty. In quotation marks. Do you see it? Then the final line is the poet Keats making an observation. That's all you know on earth and all you need to know. Now, wait a minute. Let me ask a couple of quick questions here as we end. You can jot down answers in your notes at 3B. Is it the case that all beautiful people are true? Is that the case? So, for example, you see somebody that's drop dead gorgeous, you can immediately assume about him or her, oh, well, they always tell the truth. Is that true? Remember, Hamlet asks Ophelia, are you beautiful? Are you honest? Are you truthful? Are you beautiful? Are you fair? Remember? He says those two things don't go together. You'll recall that, right? Keats, of course, a huge fan of the play Hamlet. All right, let's go the other way. This one often is a little bit more thorny question. Is the truth always beautiful? Oh. So there the guy and girl are sitting. She looks up at him and says, what are you thinking? Does she really want to know? If he tells her the truth, will she always see that as beautiful? Well, we've lived in this world long enough to know beautiful people ain't always true. And the truth often is something other than beautiful. Sometimes it's just outright painful. And sometimes they even have that phrase, the ugly truth. In other words, this is ugly, but you need to hear this, honey. Here's the truth. Wham! Just like a bat across the forehead. Well, then explain to me how this work of art can say, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. How's that work? The only answer that we can really easily give to this is on my whiteboard. Look at it and get a sense of why it works. In what box do you put beauty? It's already up there. In what box? You can put beautiful bodies in the first box, but you can't put the concept beauty in the first box. There it is. Right? Where will we put the word truth as a concept? In which box? It doesn't go in the first box, right? You have to put truth in that second box. In this second box, look at my whiteboard, beauty is truth. Truth is beauty. Just like love, just like freedom, just like energy, and on and on and on we go. Concepts. Do you got me? Right? In other words, there is no such thing as more or less love when we're talking about the second box. It's just love. Who has more energy, you or Ruthie's tree? No, you understand, it doesn't work that way. It's not like you can talk about more energy or less energy. It's just energy, right? Beauty is truth, truth, beauty is what the work of art. So notice, here it is. The urn is in the first box, but it teaches us something if we're willing to listen. Namely, there's something beyond the work of art, right? They're the concepts of beauty and truth. Now look at the last line. Keats, the speaker, will say, that is all you know on earth, and all you need to know. What is all you know? What is all you know? Well, whoa, this is an interesting 3B question. We're just a few days away from graduation. What about if I ask this question? If I had you write down one and only one thing that you feel like was the most important thing you ever learned in your 12 years of school. Ready, set, go. And then about that one thing, let's just say, that's the only thing you'll ever need to know. In other words, you don't need to learn anything else. You've done it all. You've learned everything you need to know for the rest of your life. Ready, go. Write it down. Keats just told you what it is. Keats says, the only thing you can ever really know, K-N-O-W, right, is beauty is truth, truth, beauty. But whoa, 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 he goes one step further. He says, but don't be sad about the fact that's all you ever get to know in your whole life. That's all you need to know. In other words, if you can just understand this concept, that's all you need to know for the rest of your life. Done. You've done it. You've learned everything you need to know. Oh. Now that begs a really intriguing question. What is it that one really ever can know? Now this is the field of what we call, for your notes, epistemology. Epistis, the Greek root for knowledge, right? In other words, what can you actually know? Epistemology, okay? Well, we draw a line, don't we, where we kind of do one of these numbers like this. Watch this. We draw a line. This is our line of epistemology, what you can know. On one end, we'll put the term absolute, right? This is the stuff where you say, I know 100%. This is 100% knowledge, okay? 100%. Undoubted. Completely true, right? The only problem with saying this is that at one time everybody thought the world was flat, huh? Right? And that if you didn't have a certain view, you kind of ended up toast on a post or soap on a rope, right? Or, of course, the people who believe this way have tendencies to fly airplanes into buildings because they know they're 100% right. Am I right about this? And so we have a tendency to epistemologically to look at this and go, you know, I'm not so sure about this. All the way on the other end, the view of the relative. Right? The relative. What does the relative say? There are no absolutes. You can't know anything. Of course, the only problem with saying there are no absolutes is what? You've just postulated one absolute. That is to say, there are no absolutes. Right? That's what we call, think about that. If you say there are no absolutes, you can't know anything, dude, you just said something that you're supposed to know. That's at least one thing. Right? It's what we call the performative contradiction, the relativity argument false. But we don't really like the absolutist argument either because, you know, we know we're capable of faulting. So what's a third position? Well, it's what we call the fallibilist position. The fallibilist position is the one taken by science. It says this. I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. So about any position that I hold, I say, I think I'm right, but I've been wrong before, as other humans as well. So I'm going to keep trying to challenge my views to continue to believe if they're right or wrong. Keats will say this makes the most sense. To believe in truth and beauty in the world. How can you live in a world of such ugliness and continue to believe in beauty, in truth, in love? Keats's answer in a word is art. Art. This is what art does for us. It is not only for entertainment, it is, now the academic term, a propedeutic. That is to say, didactic. That is to say, instructional. It teaches us something. What is it that it teaches us? Beauty is truth. Truth, beauty. It's all you know on earth and all you need to know. All right, so there you go, an introduction to Keats and his pals, the Romantics.